Good morning, it's Friday, January 9th, 2026. I'm meteorologist Andrew Pritchard, taking a look at your Canadian Prairie weather story. We've got patchy snow flurries across the region this morning, but that's about it as we look at the next week to 2 weeks, as we continue to just wait for the jet stream to come to life in any sort of meaningful way to bring active weather across the prairies, something more than these flurries. So we look at the last 10 days of precipitation, pretty dry across the entirety of the prairie. You can make your way over to portions of southern Manitoba, where we've seen about half an inch of precipitation, a little bit more in some areas over the last 10 days, but Calgary, dry. Edmonton, on the drier side. Saskatoon, we're talking about 3/10. Regina, a little more than a tenth, up to 2/10. They're really struggling to get any sort of meaningful precipitation, not just into the prairie, but down into parts of the northern high plains of the U.S. and the upper Midwest. And we had a storm system make its way through the central U.S. just over the last 24 hours, but really dry across a lot of North America right now as we wait for meaningful storm systems to roll through. To this point, everything kind of deflected off to the north and to the west. Alaska down through British Columbia, parts of the Pacific Northwest, higher elevations have seen incredible amounts of snow here, but these systems are again, they're deflected off to the north and to the west, and they don't make their way in, bringing that heavy swath of snowfall to the prairie or the northern plains or the Midwest. It's just a Alaska, British Columbia sort of pattern as we kind of zoom in here. Again, some of these areas from, coastal Alaska, Juneau, all the way down through British Columbia, absolutely astronomical snow totals. So it's the Pacific has, been active. We're driving a lot of Pacific moisture into portions of North America, but it's not making it east of the Rockies right now. And if it is, death by flurries, and these little clipper systems is kind of how I refer to, it's a pretty classic La Nina pattern here, but really extreme when we're talking about the lack of precipitation lately and in the near term across the prairies. We had a burst of that kind of early in the season, a lot of cold and some snow action, but just kind of stagnant since then. So we look at the satellite picture, and here's the storm system that brought severe weather and showers and storms to parts of the central U.S., a little bit of snow to parts of the upper Midwest, and then this big low over the Pacific that continues to drive big moisture into coastal portions of Alaska down here into British Columbia, and just kind of little disturbances that are rather moisture starved make their way over the top of the ridge and bring some flurries to the prairie, but not a big meaningful storm system. They're kind of flanking the region right now. Again, the radar here this morning, we've got some light flurries, maybe a couple snowflakes in the Edmonton area, between Edmonton and Calgary, maybe some very light snow flurries making their way through Winnipeg and surrounding portions of southern Manitoba today. That's about it. Temperatures right now on the cold side, we're talking about anywhere from -10 to -15 across a lot of the prairie. Colder spots in some corners, getting down to around -20 in parts of southern Manitoba and east central Saskatchewan. And then certainly as you head north of Highway 16, a bit colder there as well. As we kind of track these snow flurries, these corridors of very, very light snow over the next 3 days. This is your Friday morning. Again, I mentioned maybe some flurries in Winnipeg, maybe some flurries up here in Edmonton as we head through the day today into tonight. Your Saturday is pretty quiet just about everywhere. Saskatoon down to Regina, maybe a couple snow flurries. Then we take it into a Sunday that's quiet across the prairies as well. So total precipitation by type, Friday through Monday, January 12th, we're talking about light flurries, maybe a very light dusting or coating from Edmonton to Saskatoon down to Winnipeg over the next 3.5 days. But if I take it even further into next week, all the way through Wednesday, January 14th, total snow across the region, this is in centimeters. So we're talking about a trace up to a couple of centimeters of snow here. Light coating to a dusting. If I zoom out, again, you see a lot of snow from coastal Alaska down through British Columbia. And you've got this other corridor here through Ontario. We're just right between areas of, more supportive jet stream flow. And as I add in the next, this is 15 days. We're taking it through January 23rd and 24th. Not much better there. Again, a couple doses of some very light snow, 5, maybe 10 centimeters, something like that. Take a look at the upper level pattern that's driving this, and you'll see the problem. You see a lot of red here flanking the western, coast of North America. I'll go ahead and walk it back here. But in the near term, we've got ridging in place up from, California through Alberta, this ridge axis kind of oriented right through the region this weekend. So that's why, again, moisture deflected to the northwest, all of it being deposited. You just follow the blue line here. Essentially here is where the core of the jet is. So Pacific moisture deflected up here into northern BC, all the way through coastal Alaska. And then we get just these little moisture-starved kind of disturbances that are wrung out, they're weakened, and they kind of lift really not even through the prairie. Kind of the main storm track is north of the prairies. We'll take it even further. This is into next week. The ridge reinforces itself. This is January 14th and 15th. Enormous ridge right now. Axis right from California through Alberta. This is going to keep the same flow trajectory of the Pacific Ocean here up through coastal Alaska, far northern British Columbia. We will bring some colder air in at this point, maybe to eastern areas here. Winnipeg, you get that flow out of the north. We're going to deliver a colder shot of air to the Great Lakes, parts of the eastern U.S. and eastern Canada here, but big ridge west, trough east, that's not going to be an active snowy pattern across the prairies, and it's going to be one that's really going to struggle to bring big cold into the region as well. So pick your side how you feel about that. I know we need some moisture. I know some people don't like the cold, so if you like mild weather, this is the pattern for you, mild and pretty quiet. I'm animating the next 2 weeks, and I just kind of let it play there because there's not much to talk about as it relates to the prairies. We've got these very light flurries. This is what's going on right now, Friday into Saturday, January 9, 10, 11. We get this big ridge across the region. Here goes a low. Again, the storm track comes in up over the top here and then down here. This is a 993 millibar low, which is not weak, but it's the wrong storm track, and it's weekend, as far as the storm track is not right to tap into the Gulf, and the storm system itself has really had its moisture wrung out and is much weaker as it quickly traverses the region here. This would be a Monday to Tuesday, maybe some very light snow flurries or some light drizzle associated with that. But the ridge blows up and we're just pretty quiet. This is where I think some cold air surges into eastern parts of the prairie, maybe some flurries accompanying that. This takes us into January 19th. This will be another clipper system around 19th and the 20th, kind of bringing another shot of some colder air to the east, maybe some flurries in Manitoba. Splitting hairs on these clipper systems. This could maybe, be a better one, a better trajectory here, but this is still something that's going to produce a trace to maybe a couple centimeters. And this is all the way out to January 22nd and 23rd. I would not put much stock into that. So as we look at the next 15 days, you see some white shading there from the prairies down into the northern plains. But when I show you what this actually equates to, total precipitation over the next week or so, we're talking about a couple of centimeters or a couple of millimeters, of liquid precipitation up to maybe 5 to 10 millimeters of precipitation across Manitoba where it's a little bit heavier. So just really struggling to bring in meaningful moisture across a lot of North America. Coastal Alaska, British Columbia, they're ready for the Pacific Ocean to turn it off, probably ready to build up a wall there to stop the Pacific moisture. And then as you look over toward the east, portions of Quebec and Ontario certainly looking like they could get some active weather here over the next week or so. I'll show you the jet stream and why that is, but first to look at the temperatures. And again, it's January. It's going to be, January mild, but a lot of mild air. We're talking about temperatures, 10 to 15 degrees Celsius warmer than average at times over the next week before potentially a little bit of a walk back of that. You see some colder colors start to appear there around January 20th to the 25th. Total precipitation, again, for the 30-day period, this is the European weeklies, January 15th through February 15th. And again, you see some white there, but there's not much signal here. We've got a pattern with pretty low confidence here, but the issue, as I kind of show you here, this is the jet stream. We're looking at kind of the global equatorial focused view. This would be a snapshot on January 17th, the morning here, a week from tomorrow. And you see this fast jet stream flow across the Pacific, the West Pacific, and then you see that big kind of little arch there in the jet stream, that hump, that upside down U across the Pacific coast, British Columbia, into the prairies. And that is our ridge. We just cannot bring storm systems in with this blocking pattern here, this split weekend jet stream. And as I take it all the way out to the 24th of January, you got that fast corridor, the red shading here that rushes, from Africa across Asia into the Western Pacific, and then it just dies. And you got split weak flow across Western North America, and then you get a corridor of faster flow across Eastern North America into the Atlantic. And that's how you end up with a pattern like this, where again, you got a lot of deeper colors, heavy precipitation across the North Pacific into Alaska and British Columbia, then a big gap, and then the faster flow resumes over Eastern North America. And that's where you get better storm systems then, where these clippers kind of dive down into the central US, and then they pick up that faster flow. They're able to kind of become a bigger storm system and then run up the east coast there. And that's how you get a pattern there that is just kind of flanking the prairies. So we continue to look way down the horizon here, where some of our longer range models do suggest that We should get back into a more active pattern, a more consolidated, faster flowing and organized jet stream across North America. That's probably going to be tied with this transition, though, from La Nina, which we're in now, that is expected to quickly weaken through the rest of the winter, towards neutral, and then eventually El Nino in the spring. So we look back at some of these years where we've gone from La Nina quickly transitioning into El Nino from winter into early spring, and pick out some analogs. And on our team here at Nutrien, we've really been focusing on 2018. I kind of invite you to go jump into some of our daily videos that Eric and Matt put out in the mornings, because they're really spending a lot of time analyzing this. But, some of these analog years suggest maybe it is going to be a slower winter here, and then maybe a gradual ramp up as we get into the spring. So that's kind of where I land right now. The pattern looks pretty quiet as far as big high impact storm systems. There's going to be flurries at times, but the pattern overall is going to be pretty mild and boring over the next 10 to 15 days. High temperatures and low temperatures the next 10 days in Calgary. Again, 5 to 10 degrees for your highs for much of the next 10 days. Very similar here in Edmonton. It's going to be warmer in the west, a little bit cooler in the east. So you'll see that transition here. Again, there's that shot of colder air that potentially comes in over the back half of next week into the next weekend. On the other side of January 16th, maybe flipping a bit colder. You see that here in Winnipeg as well. Not quite as mild, a little more access to the colder air in the east, but still, pretty comfortable for mid-January standards, considering where it could be this time of the year. So have a wonderful week. We'll get back on this weekly cadence here as we kind of wait for the jet stream to come back to life across North America.